Today's guest is Kevin Roth. In 2015, he was given a death sentence, but he knew they were wrong from his OBE. This completely changed his life, and now he teaches others how to go from surviving to thriving. Kevin, thank you so much for joining me, and welcome.
Thanks, Jeff. I'm a big fan of your show, so I'm glad to be here.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. All right, Kevin, since you're a big fan, you know that you all love out-of-body and near-death experiences. So if you don't mind, let's start on the day that yours happened and see how it intertwines into your story here.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go back even a little further because I have two sisters. They're older. I'm the youngest. And after my second sister, Beth, was born, my mother had her tubes tied. And then 2 years later, I was born. So that'll set the whole story up for you. That's kind of bizarre. But I always knew or had a sense since I was a young kid, I would say probably about 5 or 6, that I felt like a fish out of water, that this planet, this experience just didn't seem to make sense. You know, you look up at the sky, there's no lid. What's going on? And I was sort of born with that question. I was also born very musical. And I was also born very dyslexic and ADD, but they didn't know about that back then. So as a young kid, and this is almost as if this had happened yesterday, I was shown, you know how in NDEs they see reviews of their lives? I saw a preview of my life. It was really kind of in 3 sections from what I can recall. And the first section was that I would have a difficult childhood. The second was that it would still be kind of difficult, but I'd be very successful. And then the third thing is I would come to understand this question, which was, what is this presence? You know, a lot of your guests talk about when they have these NDEs, they feel a sense of home. And I just never felt like Earth was home. I just sensed that there was something else going on. And that really stuck with me. So I'll talk a little bit in the sense of how I viewed it. You know, when you go to a movie, there's the movie screen, which I guess in this case you could call consciousness or God or Buddha or whatever you want to call it. And then the movie that plays is sort of like your life. And we get caught up in the movie when we're watching a good movie. We don't even remember that there's a screen. But this overriding presence, consciousness, God, whatever you want to call it, seemed to me at a really young age that that's all there was. And this whole thing was just a dream or a farce or something, but it didn't seem real. Still doesn't, but now I understand why. So the young Kevin had a tough time. One of the things that happened to me early on around, I guess it was around 8, is my sister brought home an album of a group called Peter, Paul, and Mary, who I mentioned because they play a very significant role in my journey. But I was a fanatic about this group. I mean, most of my kids my age were like into the Beatles and rock and roll. There was something about this folk music group that just pulled me. And the first OBE experience was feeling this like overriding presence. But there was also sort of an out-of-body feeling in connection with Peter, Paul, and Mary. And I've been trying to think of how I can describe the OBE, because it's not just one feeling, you know, they change. But it's almost like I'm watching a movie and I'm walking into it. So that was around 8. And then my mother, when I was 13, died suddenly. And my father met a woman after my mom died, and he remarried 2 months later. So there was a lot of havoc there. There was no time for healing, but that's just how the cards fell for me. The next very strange thing that happened is I had an elementary school librarian who played guitar, and she used to like when I played piano because I had a really good ear for piano. In fact, that was one of the few things I was praised for as a kid. And one day she said to me, you know, I know this guy and he knows this girl who sounds like Joni Mitchell. And I was a really big Joni Mitchell fan. So if you want, he'll take you to this party. Now I'm 13. My mother just died. I'm not into meditation at all. But again, this OBE kind of like, you're going. I didn't even know the guy. And I went with him, and we went to this house where they were doing these meditations. And upstairs in the kitchen was a woman playing the dulcimer, which is the instrument behind me. And when I saw her and I saw the dulcimer, it was like, boom, that's your magic carpet ride. What was very strange about it is that she was getting out of the music business because she had met this kind of guru sheikh who talked about God. And my whole question was about God, but I wasn't really religious. So I sort of followed her, and she taught me a little bit about the dulcimer, but not very much. And somewhere along the line, I decided that if I could become rich and famous, all my problems would be solved. So that's what I focused on. Plus the fact that I just got praised all the time for music, and I had a terrible time in school because I was really dyslexic. You know, my father would say, well, if 3 and 2 are 5, what's 2 and 3? And I just wouldn't know. And he used to get mad at me, you know, because he had no idea, well, how could that be? So I started to play the dulcimer, and it kind of became my life raft. And I was very interested in psychic things and astrology things and looking for this home. Not so much like, how do I get out of this place, but like, what's going on? This is just really strange. So, you know, life was really bouncy for me, to be honest with you. You know, I had to didn't get along well with the stepmother. School was a trip. But I had this experience right after playing the dulcimer that I should get a record contract, which is a ridiculous thing to think. I mean, I didn't even know anybody who played the dulcimer except Anne, who introduced it to me. And sometimes when these OBE things come, it's sort of like it pushes me in a direction that I have no intention of going, which I'll tell you about a little bit later on. But I was 14, 15, I played the dulcimer 2 years, and I got a record contract. I sent a tape to a record company called Folkway Records, who had Woody Guthrie and Pete Seeger. And I thought, wow, I got a record contract. And I got signed at 16, and I made like I think about a dozen records for him. So what happened is I had a career, and I started to travel around the country trying to become known as a dulcimer player. And dulcimer was just becoming popular in the 70s. So I sort of caught the wave of it. And all along thinking, you know, I'd run into people who were spiritual or psychic or something like that. And I would and they were always older than me. I was always really attracted to it. And I, in my own way, was saying, how can I get to this home? How can I find this peace? You know, I would write songs about it. I'd sing about it. And I think music pretty much saved me. So the first part of that OBE projection really did happen. And then things started to get weirder. Out of the blue, just one day I was reading the newspaper and I read about children's family music. And I didn't have any kids. I wasn't really that into kids at the time. And I just decided that, you know, with this thing like, okay, go make a kids record. So I contacted somebody and I started to make children's records, and I started to make money, and they started to win awards. And it like sort of catapulted my music career, and very strange things happened. One of the things was that I got a phone call from a TV producer in New York, and he had put his daughter to sleep with my lullaby record and wanted me to sing the theme to a show called Shining Time Station, which was based on Thomas the Tank Engine. Mm-hmm. And he wanted me to sing it. So I went into New York. He was going to star Ringo's Star of the Beatles. And he offered me, you know, sort of a contract deal. And I took it back to my music attorney, and he said, no, don't do it. It's not a good deal. Mm. So I went back to New York, and I was talking to him about it. And I said, you know, he said not to do it. And, you know, Rick, who was a great guy, you know, just a great guy, he said, you know, that's fine. But I understand. But, you know, it's New York City. I can get anybody to sing this. If you do it and the show takes off, you're going to be set. And I remember, Jeff, that moment sitting in that restaurant, and it was like, you're doing this. If you have to pay him, you're doing this. That was the first and only time I ever went against my music attorney's advice. And I said, okay, I'll do it. The show became really, really big. and it launched me into this career. And I ended up becoming well-known, pretty well-known, you know, I mean, I'm not Bob Dylan, but well-known and rich. In between that time, I realized that money was not buying any happiness. But stranger things began to unfold. It was almost like I was being shown these lessons over and over and over again. And this story I'm going to tell you, it still blows my mind. I was talking to my friend about it because he was part of it. I had a concert in Philadelphia, and I had a really bad neck ache. My whole shoulder, I could barely move my neck. And I had this really big feeling I was going to die. There was just no question about it to me. And I was telling my friend Roy about it, and he said, "You're probably not going to die. You're crazy." But he knew that I had these little out-of-body experiences, and I didn't know what they were. You know, I mean, I didn't even know about NDEs back then. It was just kind of like 1 foot on the planet, 1 foot out of the planet all the time. And you can get into that zone, by the way, when you're creative. They call it flow. You just kind of channel this energy because everything's pretty much energy. And I happen to know a really great astrologer. And she looked at my chart. She says, "You're not going to die." But I swore up and down. I said, "This is going to happen." And I had a concert in Philadelphia. It was a Friday night. And Roy and I drove in. I gave the concert. And on the way home, it began to sleet. And the roads in Philadelphia got really, really slick. So what would have been normally a 40-minute drive home was an hour and a half. And I got home. I was living in an apartment next to my parents. It must have been maybe 12, 1 o'clock in the morning, and the phone rings just as I walked in. And there's a lady on the other end, and she said, "We're trying to locate Kevin Roth." And I'm thinking, well, who is, you know, is this some, you know, if I had a fan, maybe it was that, you know, these people sometime would find my number and call me up, you know, "Hey, I just got a dulcimer. Are you Kevin Roth?" You know, and I said, "Well, this is Kevin Roth." And there was this like silence. And she said, "I don't understand. We're looking for his family." I said, "Well, what do you want with his family?" And she said, "Well, there's been an accident and he's been killed. And we're trying to locate his family." And I said, "Well, I'm Kevin Roth and I'm alive." And I went to sleep. I told Roy about it, and he like, yeah, you know, "You're nuts anyway. You know, you have these things happen." In the morning, I was woken up by my dad knocking on my door to see if I was alive, because the radio, I lived in a place called Chester County, and the radio had announced that Kevin Roth of Chester County had been killed. Now, I was really well known in Chester County, and in that area, they played my music and stuff like that. But what had happened was this guy, Kevin Roth, his sister had picked up my business card, I guess given it to him, and he had my card in his wallet. So I guess they assumed that that was my number. And I got to tell you, man, I mean, I feel really badly for his family. I never met the guy, but I got to witness my own death, the reaction to my own death. It was like, I mean, I never even knew anybody really cared. I mean, the radio was playing music in my honor. And I was really freaked out because I had a show Saturday night and I'm thinking nobody's going to come. So I started to call the radio stations that played my music and say, you know, I'm alive. And I got really freaked out by that, which is understandable. Sure. But it wasn't unusual for things like that. You know, I would go on a concert tour in the middle of nowhere and I'd get stuck in snow at 3 o'clock in the morning and some guy with a tractor would just come by. So I kept looking for I kept praying to God or, you know, let me understand what's going on. I mean, I knew I didn't write the music. I mean, Bob Dylan and Leonard Cohen will tell you that we don't write the songs. You know, actually nothing that happens is really of our doing. But it just got stranger and stranger and stranger. And then I just thought, you know what? I'm in California at that time. You know, a little while later, I'd moved to California, and I said, I'm rich. I kind of got known, and I'm more miserable than I've ever been. So I'm getting out of the music business. I'm just going to go see if I could grow up. I was about 33, and I moved to Florida. And then the beginning of the major OBEs came, like small bubbles, big bubbles, and then, you know, this huge. So to make a long story short, what happened is I moved to Florida, and my dad lived there. I was really close to my dad. And I started like a little funky retail store. And in 2015, pardon the expression, the shit hit the fan. And my 9-year relationship ended. My dad suddenly died, and I closed my store. But let me tell you about the dad dying, because this is something that's so important for your listeners to hear about this, because you've got to trust your gut on stuff. He was in the hospital not very long, and I called him and he said, "Don't come." He said, "I'll probably be discharged on Monday." And it was a Friday, and I was driving to my store to open up the store. And I just had this like another one of these experiences like, "Nope, you're going to the hospital." The hospital was 45 minutes away. There was no way I could go there and get back and open my store in time. But you're going to the hospital. Just forget about it, Kevin. That's where you're going. And I went in, and he was in really bad shape. He could barely talk. He did ask me how the store was, and I said it was fine. And then something very strange happened. I stayed about 20 minutes because I really had to get back for the store. And I said to him out of the blue, I said, "I love you." And I say out of the blue because we were in a family that expressed that stuff. And he said, "I love you too." And I left. And 2 hours later, I was in my store just doing my thing, and I got another one of these like, ding-a-ling things, and I called the hospital, and he had just died. Mm. So again, I was led, I believe, to the hospital to hear that "I love you" thing. And, I tell students and clients all the time when I work with them on this stuff, you have a chance to tell someone that you love them, do it, because life can change on a dime. That was a tremendous healing moment for me, man, because even though he's physically gone, I feel him around all the time. But it was a pretty sad time, and things were screwed up. And I went in my apartment and I sat there and I thought, I don't know what to do. And then I had one of the bigger OBEs. And what came to me was that I should move to Kansas, where my sister lived, and it would be a respite, and that I would have a major illness. I'd be okay. And then I'd probably go to California. And I couldn't understand, these things that come with such clarity. It's almost like, people on your show talk about these deceased ones talking to them, but it's not verbal, and they feel them, but they can't see. It was just like that. It was just as clearer than really being on the planet. And I thought, I'm healthy. There's nothing wrong with me. I don't know what's going on. But I called my sister. She said, "Come to Kansas." So I drove to Kansas with my little dog, Bosco, and 16 dulcimers and a couple clothes. And I was there maybe 2 weeks. And out of the blue, Peter and Paul had come to give a concert. Mary had passed away several years ago. And by the way, they had become really close friends of mine and mentors, and they helped my career. Peter did a duet of Puff the Magic Dragon. Mary had me sing at the Kennedy Center. I mean, my idols embraced me. And I started to understand why the connection, they weren't a small folk group, and they were like the biggest folk group in the world, actually. And for them to take me under their wings to a certain extent was a huge, huge deal. But not so different, because I had sort of seen this, it sort of all fell into place. And while I was at that concert, Noel Paul, his name is Noel Stuckey, he took the middle name Paul for the group, offered me a record deal to write a spiritual album, which I had never thought about. So I thought about it, and I thought, wow, the guy's offered me a record deal. Why not, And then I went maybe a week or two, and I was kind of excited about it. I thought, well, life is picking up. And then I just went for a routine dermatology appointment. You move someplace, you set up the bank and the doctor and the chiropractor and all these things. And this dermatologist, he was an old guy. I just picked him randomly. I walked into his office, and the first thing I noticed was that he had a Buddha on his shelf. And I thought, well, that's kind of weird, And he looked at this little freckle on my nose, and he said, I don't like the look of it. And I said, no, don't worry about it, because my dermatologist in Florida saw it. They said, no problem. He said, I don't think so. He said, I don't like the look of it. He said, let's do a little scraping of it and send it out. I didn't think anything of it. And to make a long story short, within a short period of time, I ended up being told, after I had a little biopsy, and this is shrinking a very long story, very short. I was called and told I had stage 3 melanoma. And there's only 4 stages, and there's no cure for melanoma if you get it really badly. I had been waiting for the test results, and I hadn't heard. I was getting nervous. And in my apartment, there was a picture of me and my dad. And as if he was in the room, I heard him say, it's going to be rough, Kev. It's going to be bad news. You'll be okay, but it's going to be tough. And I remember because he always called me Kev. And the next morning is when I got the phone call from the doctor. And he said, I want to take this across the hall to an oncologist. And I want you to see them immediately. So like my whole life, it's like, because you never think you're going to get cancer. It's like me, healthy. I work out, I eat right. I can tell you what I think brought it on was stress, which is one of the reasons that I teach what I teach now. But I went and I had these scans done. And the oncologist that I went with was a woman. I don't remember her name, but I didn't like her from the second I saw her. I had a bad feeling about this woman. So while I was waiting for the test results to come back, I was looking for other oncologists. There was only one guy in Kansas City, and there's a lot of doctors in Kansas City. There was one that I just radiated towards, and I said, he's your guy, but he wasn't taking any new patients. So I couldn't do anything about it. I had the test done. I had a CAT scan and an MRI, and I was sure, except for the fact that my OBE said, you're going to be fine, that this thing had spread all over me because I made the mistake of Googling the stuff on the internet and reading the horror stories. So I went in to get my results. And I remember I went in with my sister and I told her, I said, be prepared because this thing's probably all over my body and I probably aren't going to be alive very longer, which didn't bother me because I don't think, I know that this life isn't real anyway. It's just kind of like one of these dream things, but still, right? And she put the tests up on the screen. And as if she was saying, where do you want to go for lunch? And you got any plans for dinner? She said, almost like in one straight sentence, well, the cancer hasn't spread anywhere. So I want you to go see this other doctor because we want to remove the lymph nodes. I mean, not like, congratulations, Kevin, I mean, it was like, first of all, I couldn't believe that it hadn't spread. I couldn't believe it. In a way, I knew that it didn't spread. And then I said to her, why would you want to remove the lymph nodes if there's no signs of cancer? And she said, because it's protocol. And I came as close to hitting somebody as I've ever come into my life. I mean, I'm a real chill guy, but I stood up and I said to her, my name isn't protocol. And if you don't see cancer, you're not taking anything out. And I got up and I walked out and I went to the receptionist's desk to pay my little copay. And there on the counter was the doctor I wanted's card. And I said to the lady, I said, does he work here? And she said, yeah. I said, I want to see him. And she said, you can, he's booked. And I said, no, you don't understand. I'm not leaving until I see him anytime. And I got to give an award to this woman because, man, she had the dirtiest look down. She's the queen of dirty looks, man. But she said, if you can be here at 7 a.m. tomorrow, I'll fit you. Like, I wouldn't have slept there to be with this guy. Again, it was my gut. It was following my sense. And thank God, because he was the only oncologist, and I saw 4 of them, that said, do nothing. Let's wait and see what happens. But he also said, and he took time with me, a doctor that took time with me. He was compassionate. I mean, he was just like, great, But he did say there's a 70% chance it's going to come back within a year, and then you'll be dead within 3. And I said, well, what about these and he said, none of it's really working. So I went home and I had this epiphany. And the epiphany was, if I end up dying, which I didn't think I would, I better figure out what really matters to me and why, and what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. And I turned the switch off of stress, negativity, worry. I just changed the channel, Jeff. I just said, if I'm going to be dead, first of all, what really matters to me is my music and my art, because that's my purpose in life. It's so important that people follow their purpose in life. And if they don't even know what it is, I help them find it. But it's so important to follow, because that's what you came on this dream planet for. The second thing was my dog, Bosco. It was my little miniature dachshund. He's like my fur angel. I wanted to spend all my time with him. And the third thing was that if I was going to die, I sure as hell wasn't doing it in Kansas. So I decided I'm going to go to San Diego and create this bohemian life. Now, on paper, I couldn't afford it because, I could barely make it. I'd lost all my money in the stock market, and then I lost the rest of it in the real estate market. And it was a mess. I mean, I had some money, but, not San Diego money. It's expensive to live out here. So I called a friend of mine and I said, he was a realtor, and I said, can you find me an apartment for $1,000 a month? 1 bedroom with parking and laundry. Throw in a dozen roses. He said, you can't even get a studio for $1,000. But I knew I was going to San Diego. And I found it. This apartment, completely redone, $1,000, parking, laundry, everything. So you see, it all kind of came. And I began to recognize that there's absolutely something bigger going on besides my agenda. And then things got a little weirder, okay? So I was in my apartment and I was freaking out because I was given a death sentence, and I thought, I got to change everything about my life. I've got to let go of stress. I've got to get rid of toxic people. I have to start eating healthy. I have to start envisioning things. And I saw a movie on Netflix about a guy named Yogananda, who I'd kind of heard of, but didn't know who he was. And he was a guru, and I watched, and it was interesting. And then I got done and something said, watch it again. And I never watch movies back to back. I mean, maybe a year away, So I watched it again. And then I had another one of these things that said, go look for one of his churches or fellowships. He talked about something called self-realization. But honestly, he was a little far out for me. But what he said was very healing, very sweet. His story was interesting. I knew Steve Jobs and George Harrison liked him. But I thought, go find one of his churches. But I knew at this point, if it's coming to me, I got to. And I figured he had a church in California, or New York. If he had anything in the Midwest, it may be Chicago, not in Kansas. How would I find one in Kansas, right? I Googled his website, and I could literally walk out my apartment door and within 5 minutes be at his church. I'd driven past his church 1,000 times, never saw, his name wasn't on it. And it was like, at this point, life was so like, oh, seriously? It's like, all right. I'll just go with it. You got a death sentence, here's the guru across the street. And I went into his service on a Saturday morning. And I don't know what they were really saying much, but I felt my depression and my concern just lift. I just felt like, oh man, have I found the right place? Even though I didn't know much to do with it, it got me interested in something called self-realization. And then I began to dig. And I ran across a teacher from India named Ramana Maharshi, who was in Time magazine. He is the only kind of guru teacher. He didn't even like being called a guru, who everybody likes. He quotes Jesus. Really smart guy. And when I read what he said, I said, that's home. He's talking about home. And I recognized it like I recognized the dulcimer. It was like, this is your teacher. And I didn't really want a guru. I'm a kind of a, don't woo-woo me, But it just connected. And then I kept Googling and I found a teacher in California. And when I came out here, I met him. His name's Robert Wolf, and he's an author. You'd never know that he was a teacher because he's very, very under the radar. Maybe not now, but his books are really under the radar. And he began to show me, or led me to the idea of understanding who I am. And I came to understand that, they say, well, I'm a spiritual being having a human experience. I believe that this is a dream, and that we have an experience of a dream. We're a dreamer in the dream having the dream. But we are that we're seeking. That God isn't up there, or Jesus, whatever you want to call it. They're not there. There is no there. Everything is, or like they say, I am that I am. That's the truth. That's what I've come to learn. When I work with people on discovering their passions, sometimes people will come up to me and they'll say, well, I'm into Jesus. And I'll say, like, be still and know that I'm God, or I am that I am. And, they say, well, yeah, you know about Jesus? I said, yeah, of course I know about Jesus. If they're Buddhists, I say something about Buddha, emptiness and form is emptiness. If they're atheists, it's like, okay, you don't believe in anything, but you like nature, right? So everything is just one beautiful thing. And and I'm learning about this more myself. It's about love, and it's about kind of accepting yourself. And so I ended up coming out to California. And for the first time in a couple of years, I wrote a new album that was full of joy. It was kind of fun and funky. And it actually got into the loop for a possible Grammy Award. Didn't win, but it was in there. And one day I was just kind of sitting here, and a friend asked me what I was going to be doing for a next project. And I said, I don't know. And he said, you ought to teach what you just went through. I mean, you basically survived a death sentence. You completely changed your life. The cancer hasn't come back, and you're thriving. You're doing it, man. You're just doing it. And I thought, well, that's interesting. I never thought about teaching this. And I began to think about it. And then that whole another OBE rush came, and it said, yeah, okay, so we're going to do this. This is how we're going to do it. And I start to write out what I did. And what I teach is what I do every day, which is fairly simple. I mean, I know what matters. I know why it matters. And I have a game plan. And I know about balance. And I know about riding the surfboard. Out here in California, they ride surfboards. And life is like a surfboard. You're going to get thrown off, which doesn't matter as long as you know how to get back on. And if you can understand emotional, mental, physical, and spiritual balance, you can say, okay, I'm like crazy, nervous about something, and recognize what fear is and go for a walk. You're better. I just learned how to do that. And I started to do it with the dulcimer, with this thing called Dulce meditation, where I just kind of get into this space where I just play, nothing specific. And I have this thought in the back of my head, like, well, what should I be doing today? Not like a list of things I need to do. And just clarity comes, It was really interesting because I watched your show for, quite a long time. And I was doing this Dulce meditation, and it was like, get in touch with Jeff about this. And, I had never even thought about it. I just kind of like watch it at night, And so I've learned to trust it. And what I've learned is really, it's super important. The lesson of this home thing is to be kind to yourself. This is just a bubble. It's just a dream. When your other guests talk about NDE experiences and say that's more real up there than it is here, I believe it. And I don't take anything that seriously. I mean, it's great when someone buys a record or something. I don't even go out on tour. I mean, the fame, fortune thing just doesn't even interest me anymore. I'm glad that the stuff is out there. If it comes around again, great. But I feel that my passion, my purpose is in talking about this stuff. And I didn't talk about it for a long, long time because, these are some pretty strange stories, right? So, but they happened. And as I began to talk about them, people said, oh, yeah. I thought I was hiding something, but so many people feel this, I'm taken with the fact that they're starting to talk about UFOs being real and nobody cares. It's like, oh yeah. So I don't know if it's everything that people have been through or what it is, but they talked some time ago about this new age of consciousness. And I think after things like the COVID and the whole political thing with Trump and everything, people are like coming to what I'm trying to show them. What matters? Why does it matter to me? Because if you don't know why, when those waves come, you're going to get knocked off. You're not going to get back on. So if you know why and you feel why, you can say, okay, I want to lose weight, not just so I look better, but because my daughter is getting married and I really want this. You can get through anything, as long as you have a plan and you stick to it. I talk about the 3 Ps when I teach this. You need a plan, you need patience, and you need persistence. And all of that's easy to find if you can control your mind by saying, because the mind is like a monkey, man, I don't want to do this, I want to do that, let's do this, let's do that. And if you can say, I know who I am, I know what I want, I know I'm following my purpose, and chatter away, guys, but I want to be at peace, I want to be happy. And I've never been happier in my life. And I'm past, like they say, after 5 or 6 years, the cancer doesn't return. I hope so. It could come back. I don't envision it coming back. Eventually, I'm going to die. This body's going to die of something. When I go, I go. Where am I going to go? If I never really existed, if all there is that, it doesn't die. That's the only thing that's real. What's real doesn't come and go. So where can I go? If I am that, where can I go? So I take things lighter, and I try my best to be as kind to myself as I can, because I can be pretty tough on myself, because I'm driven, and that's how I had that music career. But that's not where it's at. You got to love yourself before you can really kind of love other people. I don't mean to preach or anything like that, but all of these experiences have brought me to the fact of there is home. There was never not a home. And this overriding presence I saw as a young kid was true. I'm just like in this dream. I'm the movie on the screen. Consciousness is the screen, and it's just going to play out. And that's okay, and I hope that in the dream, there aren't a whole lot of more ups and downs, but whatever there are, and I know how to deal with them a little bit better than before.
Well, thank you for sharing your story with us. You've had some amazing synchronicities in your life, as well as some amazing experiences. So I want to start with this. You mentioned in the beginning of the podcast that you would, it was kind of like seeing a movie. And so every time you would have an OBE, would you feel like you're out of a body and the future was being presented to you? Or would you just have a knowingness implanted into your consciousness that this is going to happen? Or how are you experiencing that?
Yes and yes and yes. How I experience is it's not, you have to be in your body to know that you're out of your body. Mm-hmm. So I never felt in my body or out of my body. The closest thing I guess you would call would be maybe psychic prediction, but it wasn't really prediction because I just saw it as a movie. It was like, this is what's happening next to you, Kevin. You don't have any control. I mean, you have some control, but
Mm-hmm.
This is what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
So things like, go to this meditation party, was like, I had no reason to go to a meditation party. A couple of weeks before my dad died, or actually about a week before my dad died, my mother, who I'd never thought of, I felt in my kitchen. I mean, this woman was as far from my mind. I mean, I was like 50 or something like that. And I felt her presence. I didn't see her, I didn't hear her, but I was warned that something was coming up and I needed to prepare. That's the closest I can describe to it. It was comforting, but it was weird because none of these experiences are logical. But consciousness isn't logical, So, and we want to know what it is, but you can't describe consciousness. I mean, there's this whole movement. I'm sure you know about it, where science and all these mystics like Deepak Chopra and all these things are coming together now because they're realizing that what the mystics said eons ago is what science now is understanding with quantum physics, like space. So they say the universe is expanding. But into what? And they say, well, it's all your mind. It's all your ego. Well, break open the brain and show me the ego, show me the mind. You can't, because there is none. So they say, well, now it's all consciousness. It's consciousness. So describe consciousness. You can't do it. How can you God or consciousness is the first cause. It doesn't have a form. It doesn't have a this, it doesn't have a that. That's what I've come to understand when I question about it. What are you? Where are you? And it's like, why even ask about that stuff? It's like, you couldn't even comprehend it. Watch more Jeff's podcasts. They'll tell you, there's this loving prayer, but whatever it is, it's in sort of, you're in your body, but you're not in your body. And you're like in a movie, but you're walking into the next scene.
Is there ever a catalyst or something that's happening to you consciously or subconsciously that precipitates these experiences?
The only thing I can imagine is something like the reason I got the whole cancer thing was a spiritual kick in the ass, was to wake up. And the whole dulcimer career, the whole notoriety, all of that has led up to me helping other people discover what I've learned. So some of my clients or students, they've gotten rid of anger problems. Some have had cancer and they don't want to feel like a cancer victim anymore. Other people, one person who works for the government, and, it's like, how do I do that and stay sane? So I'm shocked at these people that learn it this quickly. So I'm hoping that what they learn, they pass on to other people. That seems to be what I'm about at the moment.
Now that you've had these experiences, do you believe that the future is already decided?
I think to a large extent, your movie's already written, but you have choices within it. From what Ramana Maharshi has written about it, it's that, this is all arranged, but you can choose. You can choose, especially choose how to handle it. I can't believe that you could be born with problems and not have the ability to learn how to work with them or to, turn the knob down on them a little bit. I believe that we do have choice. And I believe, I teach something called mindful awareness, that when you become mindful and aware that you're pissed off. People walk around in anger, they don't even know it. I didn't. I had 3 years of major stress. I had money, I had a house, I was stressed to the max. And you know what that does to the immune system, being a chiropractor. So I think that you get to choose how to handle it with, and I say this cautiously, with God's guidance. I don't like getting religious, but I believe that if you ask, sincerely ask, really ask, you'll be told.
It appears to me that you have an amazing ability to separate your consciousness from the chatter in your mind, and maybe even, when I say chatter, it even probably builds up emotions attached to that chatter. But you have this ability to separate from there and realize this is just a story or something playing within my mind, and push it away and kind of find clarity. Would you say that's true?
Yes, and here's why. Because I'm a doubter. You have to prove things to me, except things like, people like experiences I had, which I experienced myself. I believe I've come to learn that everything is a dream. It's an experience, but you have it. It's like when you go to sleep, you have a dream, and in the dream, everything is real. And then you wake up and it's not real. Same thing happens when you're awake. It's the same kind of dream. It's just kind of a waking dream. So you go through this dream experience, and when you start hitting your head up against the wall over and over again and doing things that don't work, like I teach, there's two expressions I love. When you replace what doesn't work with what does, you never go back. I tell a story about a hamburger lady. She goes to one of these little fast places. She gets a hamburger, gets a stomach ache. She's talking to a friend that night, and she says, "You ought to go to the Happy Hamburger." And she says, "What's that?" She says, "It's new. They've got chicken burgers, tofu burgers, dancing burger, all these burgers." She says, "But it'll cost you $15 a hamburger." And the woman says, $15 for a hamburger? But she goes, and it's like the ultimate nirvana hamburger. But do you think she'll ever go back to the other place? Of course she won't. She's got a stomach ache. And when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. So you need to recognize when things aren't working. That's the first thing. That's mindful awareness. Then you need to say to yourself, if it's not working, what matters to me and why? And then you take a situation like doing the wrong thing over and over again, and you begin to analyze it. And you look at the spirituality end of it, and you look at the science end of it. And science says, through quantum physics, that there is nothing. Nothing exists. They say, well, I'm here, I'm talking to Jeff. You can do that in a dream. So if science is saying nothing exists, but I'm having this experience, what's real? What do you do with it? And you begin to look at that deeply. Now, this is even beyond what I normally teach, but that's about non-duality and something called ajata, A-J-A-T-A. In fact, there's a great site, ajatasunyata.com. But you begin to look at it and you begin to realize that spiritually, they say that all this is kind of like a dream, and now science is saying it's all a dream. So what am I worried about? What am I getting all caught up in? If I get caught up in this emotionally, mentally, physically, or spiritually, and I feel good, great. But if I don't feel good, what's the point? Every time I made a record, it had to be a great record. I couldn't even tell you what was on the last 5 albums I made. I don't even know. So nothing really matters. I think what matters is that you become aware of who you are. You become aware that you're bigger than this human, form, and that what really exists is something you'll never be able to identify, but it does. It just does. So it makes sense. But in the beginning, logically, it doesn't. It sort of doesn't. But you work through it. Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Do you think you can give us a few tips besides what you've already told us? Just give the audience a few tips to help them with their lives.
Well, I hope so, because that's what I do. Mm-hmm. I think the very first thing to do is to, there's one big problem that comes with everybody. They're really hard on themselves. So you got to give yourself a break. Just relax. It's okay. If you're in real problem, if you're in serious problem, there's help out there. Find a psychologist, find a church, whatever, do whatever you do, but listen to your gut. Okay. You're loved. Okay. We are incredible, magical, dreamlike things. I mean, we don't even know how this body happens. We just take it for granted. I mean, there's no lid to the sky. We just take it for granted. We get caught up in the dream. So the first thing is be kind to yourself. The second thing is to know that you're loved and that you are what you're seeking. You can't be anything other than that. And that has no form, and it's okay. It's fine. Then you need to know what really matters to you. Do you need that big house? Do you need that job? COVID woke up a lot of people. And they said, maybe I don't need to live in New York City for $6,000 a month for a little tiny room. Maybe I don't need that stress. Maybe I can downsize, So you figure out what really matters. You follow your dreams. You want to be a potter? Learn pottery. There's ways to do it. Even if you don't have money, there's ways to do it. Then you need to know why. So you need to know what really matters. You need to know why it matters. And you need to have a game plan that works. If you have all of those things, that's great. But you need to know about feeling it and what to do when you're thrown off the surfboard in life and how to balance. And that's why I wrote this course that's coming out. I think it's going to be July 4th it's released, but we're going to do like a little pre-sale thing, especially for the folks listening if they're interested, is I teach this. Now, I do this professionally. I mean, I have clients that pay me, to do this for private sessions, but I can't talk to everybody. So I made this online course with Teachable. So it's kevinroth.teachable.com that explains this whole general theory of what to do. And at least it'll get you thinking about it, because if I could reject cancer, and I'm not saying that everyone who has cancer can just say, be gone, and it'll be gone. Everyone has their thing that they got to go through. But I really changed my life around because I said, I'm not doing this anymore. But sometimes they call it in maybe 12-step programs, hitting bottom. You can do it now. You don't need to hit bottom. Sometimes it takes hitting bottom. But that's what I suggest people to do, is to follow their gut, be kind to yourself, give yourself some me time. You can take my course, read other books, watch more of your shows. The message is pretty clear throughout all your podcasts. Chill out, it's okay. There's something really beautiful happening here. Mm-hmm. That's the best advice I could give quickly.
Thank you for that. Now, you said you made a spiritual album. Is it dulcimer with singing about spiritual concepts?
Well, Noel loved an album I made called Awakenings. And it was, that was an album that was questioning everything. And another one of these OBE things, he called me up while he was driving home and he was listening to it in his car. And he said, hey, I have an idea. Let's do an album with dulcimer, songs from Awakening, write some new songs, and let's put synthesizer behind it. So he had this concept. So I wrote that album. It has a lot of spiritual questions. The weirdest thing about that record, Jeff, was I think 3 days after I finished writing it is when I got my cancer diagnosis. I would have never been able to write it because I was so freaked out at that time. So it had already been finished. And it's called Reawakenings. I think you can find it on Amazon. It's one of the more unusual records. I think my last record, The Deviant Dulcimerist, has a song on there called Adrift, which speaks about everything I've just talked about. And that's a fun album. That's got a lot of stuff. But, I try and avoid spiritual and religious, because, I mean, I wasn't raised Christian, but I'd love to sit down with Jesus. What a hippie, what a great kind of character,
I'm just going to throw this out there, and I don't expect you to do what I ask or do what I say. And I rarely talk about myself, but I'll say this, that a few years ago I had, probably more than that, 5-6 years ago, I had terrible acid reflux. And I did, I did the medical route and the alternative route, and I got better, but I never really got over the hump until I would start every night. I would go on YouTube and I found something, brain healing music, and I would listen to it as I would go to bed. And it was just kind of, it's kind of ambient music. And even today I still listen to the kind of stuff that's like binaural beats and stuff like that. And I believe that there's a lot of stuff that you can do at putting your brain into a certain frequency that is healing for you. And actually, that's what finally healed me, was listening to that music every night.
Yeah, binaural beats, they're called. And I did an album with the sounds of the ocean behind it called Dulce Meditation.
Oh, that's where I was going. Yeah, if you ever...
Yeah. That's the last album I did. In fact, in this teaching series on Teachable, I play a little Dulce meditation and teach a breathing exercise to kind of calm down and to do that. And, more and more people are playing the dulcimer. And it's a super easy instrument to play. So I have a feeling, this is the Wink. This is a dulcimer that I actually came up with a design with a friend. It's kind of cosmic. Mm-hmm. And I teach this to people. And, it's got a really pretty sound to it. And it's very, I can't, because you play it on your lap, but, So, you do that for a while. That's why I'm so chilled out. And my dog is like super chill, And you don't even it's not as hard as the guitar or the piano. It's just really easy. So I created this cosmic dulcimer for people to purchase, or if they want to learn or whatever, how to play a musical instrument. The neat thing about playing an instrument versus listening to an instrument is that you feel the vibrations of the wood on your body. And that really makes, I think, a difference. Musically, I've actually fallen asleep to my own dulce meditation, which is how I knew it kind of worked. Either that or I was terribly bored.
What would be amazing is if you knew you could play something that when you were playing the music, it would cause you to have an OBE.
Well, I do have them because when I can't sleep at night, I mean, I've got 16 dulcimers here. There's one I take off the wall and I play it. And, the OBE thing is that you're not here and you're not there. It's not like I feel like I'm in my body or out of my body, but I'm someplace. I'm not I don't sense myself. I sense this thing that's going on mentally, or this cosmic screen. And if I can't sleep, I'll lullaby myself to sleep with an instrumental. It doesn't take long. And when I do dulce meditation every morning, I'm taken out of my head, and I'm like, one day I was doing it and I had a whole list of things to do, and the experience kind of said, go buy flowers, which I don't ever do. But by the time I went and got the flowers and I came back, everything that was a huge deal to me was gone. So I've learned, I guess I'm just so accustomed to weird stuff happening in my life that I just naturally do this, but it's teachable. I mean, it really is teachable. It's simple. That's what I teach people is just simple.
Have you ever had an intense experience while playing your dulcimer that it's almost, I guess, like an OBE where you felt like you became the music?
I can't say I did. I had one experience where I thought I was going to pass out. I never had stage fright. And I totally surrendered because I thought I'm going to be hitting the floor anytime soon. But I've never had an experience like what you're talking about. However, when I perform, you have to read an audience. So if you have a set list of songs and, you want to put a few slow ones in there, but you sense from the audience that they're ready to be up, you have to know that. So you have to feel the audience and you have to change your music. An old Pete Seeger and Peter Paul Mary trick and other tricks of other performers are not really tricks, but you want a standing ovation, have them sing with you, have them clap with you, make it about them, and that's one of the great things about this whole experience is that, a career is like, especially a music career, it's kind of full of ego, never really did me much, but I don't have any reason to really have much of an ego. Not that I don't have one, but it's like, now if I play, I play. If I don't, I don't. It's about everybody else. And that's the joyful thing about it. And, I'm new at this. I mean, I'm just beginning to learn about this. There's no end to understanding what this consciousness is or isn't. There's just no end to it. So I'm always a student of this stuff. And I'll tell you one thing that I did learn is when you look at things, let's say you're reading something spiritual, whatever it is, and you're really into it, when you go back and read it, it gets deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. It's like I've read the same book, and I teach from certain books. I've read them, I don't know, a lot. And each time it's like I've never read it before. So really, what is going on? Mm-hmm. I think the idea, instead of getting out of where I am and going into an OBE, is to just kind of stay in an OBE as much as you can, light in a light way. And the expression I guess from the Bible: have one foot in the world and one, what's this, something about having a foot on the planet or 1 foot out. Be in the world but not of it. Mm. That's pretty much it. Mm. And realize that we don't know what this is.
Do you dabble at all in the hammered dulcimer?
I do. I do. I don't like hammer dulcimer when it's played with mallets, but I had one and I was tuning it. And as I was tuning it, the resonance of it like kind of took me out. And I called a person who makes hammer dulcimers and I said, do you think we could make a wink hammer dulcimer? So there is on my website, kevinroth.org, yeah, or Kevin Roth Music, one or the other. There's pictures of the hammer dulcimer and the mountain dulcimer. And what's very strange is someone recently called me up and asked me to write music for a horror film. I mean, why would you think I would write music for a horror film?
Yeah.
But I was playing on the hammer dulcimer and I started to mute the strings and then boom, 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 boom. And I thought, oh, that's spooky. So the way I look at it is like, I don't know, someone's asked me to write a horror film, that's kind of cool, I mean, no weirder than predicting my own death and someone dying with my name, So I follow it. But the intention is different because it's written about an insane asylum where people were mistreated. So when I create the music, it's in a healing sense, as sort of an offering to those poor souls who had to go through what they went through. So, it's not the slash and dagger thing. It's sort of like a sneaky, spooky healing thing. Mm-hmm. I'm not a great hammer dulcimer player though, but I have one.
That's cool. It sounds like you have two websites. I'm assuming one is for your music and one is for your classes.
Well, I actually have three now. The music career is, you could type in Kevin Roth and I pop up on iTunes and Wikipedia and all this stuff. That's kevinrothmusic.com. And then the teaching coaching thing that I do, the personal consulting, is kevinroth.org. And then I've just launched on this platform called Teachable, where people can take a course online, is kevinroth.teachable.com. And there's a sale going on for a couple of weeks. I don't know whenever people are seeing this, it may be a month from now and the sale's over, I don't know. But you can sign up for it at a discount. But it's not very expensive anyway, So those are the three. And you can find the Teachable on the link for that, probably maybe on your thing below here, maybe, but it's on kevinroth.org as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I usually put links and I'll put a link to your websites in the description.
Okay.
All right. Well, before we finish up here, do you have one last positive message that you can share with everybody?
There's hope. Think good thoughts and good things will happen. It's change the way you look at things and the things you look at change. And that there's help. If you're depressed, man, they've got therapists. They've got programs. If you're not feeling well, there are people who care. And know that you're loved. Know that there are people who care, but you don't know about it until you put it out there. And then people show up and they say, I'm there. Everything is follow your gut, follow your heart, and just know that you're loved. I think that's the clearest thing, and that this is just a dream.
Well, that's a great message. Thank you, Kevin, for sharing that with us. And thank you again for being my guest. I really appreciate you. And I wish you massive success in whatever you're doing.
Oh, thanks. You too. And I'll keep watching.
Well, thank you. All right. You have a great evening over there.
You too.
Bye-bye. Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.